we're back.
We're jumping.
Hey, 81.3. Now Lance has been adding stuff to the painting, and he wants to make sure that the perspective is correct. And it turns out, I guess, the vanishing point, you're using single point perspective?
Yeah, I mean...
Is right in the middle, as if you're looking right at here on the dude. Right?
Yeah, and so I'm doing a nuclear power plant over on this side, and I've been able to get the ellipses on the top and the bottom using a vanishing point here, and so that they'll have the proper curve. Now, there's a way of getting these using something called a measuring point, which you guys can look up. That's on a separate sheet of paper. But in this way, all the elliptical tops and bottoms of the buildings will be in correct perspective. This is the cooling tower. This is the I don't know, the power plant or something.
That's where the reaction goes on.
Right,
This is where the steam comes out.
That's it. And right here is a smokestack. I don't know why they have them. They're not on the plans that I saw, but they always have them. At least most of the time they have them. All right.
Is this an artistic choice to be that accurate, or?
Yeah, because if you don't, the problem is that each one of these shapes has a bottom to it and a top to it. And depending on where you are, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, this angle has to be correct. It can either be up like that or down like that, and it has to be exactly right. It's not totally flat.
Now, let me explain the deal. When you're looking straight at a thing, if you're looking straight at a coffee cup, or in this case, a hyperboloid, when you're looking straight on at it, the ellipse is going to be...
The bottom of it will be flat.
It won't be tilted one way or the other way from you. But what's happening in this picture is, if you're looking here, but you're seeing something out of the corner of your eye here, the way perspective works, according to Lance's analysis, and I think that's right, there's going to be a tilt to it. And the reason you don't notice the tilt most of the time is that most of the time you're paying attention to what you're looking straight on at. So there's going to be a tilt here to the base here, just a little one.
This is too tilted, so I'm going to tilt it back down and get a little bit.
But there'll be a little bit of a tilt over here, probably with this pyramid, depending on how it's oriented.
No, that's flat. That remains flat.
Okay,
that's at one point. Anyway, I don't know anyone in the audience that's going to be interested in this, but it's a big debate between perspective artists, because some artists say, look, if you look over at it, it's going to be flat. So you should make it flat. You should make it level in the painting. And other people say, but when you take a photograph of it, it will be slightly tilted. So you should do it the way it is when you're not looking at it. It's crazy because no one's sure who's right.
Well,
in other words, both are correct.
Well, the general deal is that your brain does a lot of processing. And it makes sense of things even when those things don't make sense. For instance, if you don't see straight lines as curved when you look at a big room or anything, even though if you took a picture, the straight lines would be curved because of the effects of perspective. Your brain makes straight lines stay straight.
We're losing the audience.
All right,
we're losing the audience.
Let's get
back to this
hate crimes.
Hate crime statistics, guys. All right. So as part of in our last discussion, we were talking about the difference in the hate crimes. Now, it turns out that you can look up FBI hate crimes, and they have a lengthy thing of statistics. So I picked a year in the middle of the Obama administration, and then I picked 2016, which was actually the last year of the Obama administration, and 2017, which was the first year of the Trump administration. Okay? Mm-hmm. So in 2014, 47% of the crimes were racial. In 16, it was 57.5%. In 17, it was 58%.
Hold on, because we talked about this. In 14, they had two separate categories for racial
I'm sorry.
ethnic.
Thank you. Okay, so in 2014, for a variety of reasons, it was 58.9% racial. All right?
Slash ethnic.
Yeah. So, sorry about that. Thank you, Rick. He's on it. Okay. In 14, it was 58.9. In 16, it had gone down to 57.5. And in 17, it went up to 58. So it went up 0.5%.
Which is, and that's, I'm sure there's a plus or minus that's bigger than any of those differences.
All right. Again, the next thing we looked up was crimes against sexual orientation. In 14, it was 18.5. In 16, it had gone down to 17.7. In 17, it went down to 15.9.
Yeah, except there's probably a plus or minus there of 2 or 3%.
Let's just not have to say that every single time, okay? All right. Let me cut to the chase, okay? I had said that there was anti-Jewish crime, hate crime, and and Rick said there might have been anti-Muslim. Are you?
No, what I'm saying is that you were saying that a lot of crime might be Muslims against Jews.
Right, and there is no number for that.
No, but
nobody knows that number.
But I was arguing that in all the hate crimes that might be happening in America, 2% of the population versus 1% of the population is probably not going to generate as much as 40% of some population versus some other segment of the population.
I could not look. I couldn't find it.
Well, you can't.
All right.
It's not going to be broken down.
But what I did find was this. In 2014. In 2014, it was 56.8% anti-Jewish, 60% anti-Muslim. 16%. 16% anti-Muslim. In the last year of the Obama administration, 2016, it had gone to 54% anti-Jewish, 24% anti-Muslim. So it went down against Jews and up against Muslims. In 2017, the first year of the Trump administration, it was 58% anti-Jewish, 18.6% anti-Muslim. So it had gone up 4% against Jews and down 6% against Muslims, 5.5%, 4% against Muslims. So basically, these statistics don't prove anything because they're so close together.
Right.
So exactly why it had gone up 17% and exactly who's committing the crimes would take another week for us to figure out.
Yeah.
So let's not talk about it anymore.
So what's the next thing we're going to talk about?
Okay, so Bush 41 passed away.
Okay. All right. So Lance is going to, because he's going to start painting again, we're going to turn off the lights. I'll tell you my thing quickly. Everybody is celebrating the media in general. The first reaction of the media was to celebrate Bush as a very decent human being, a war hero, a devoted family man, a guy with a good and gentle sense of humor, who invited the guy who mocked him, Dana Carvey, on Saturday Night Live to the White House to mock him in person because he seemed to be a super nice guy. Then the second reaction of the media I looked at was for people to say, all right, he was a nice guy, but he did some bad stuff in the Republican way of doing things. But he's still a nice guy compared to Trump. Then there was a third reaction, or another second reaction was, I think the Washington Post, somebody said that he was the most successful single-term president in recent history. He presided over the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union. He prosecuted Gulf War I, which was over in months and achieved its objectives. So that's what I've got.
I think that I regret that during the Bush Senior administration, I was still a Democrat. And it's one of the reasons that I'm glad I never went into politics, because I was wrong most of my life. And so I voted for that dirtbag Clinton against Bush Senior, who turned out to have been a very good president. And I think that one of the things the most significant thing that Bush did in his presidency was the defeat of Saddam Hussein in Gulf War I. Now, there are two things that are interesting about Gulf War I. The first is what everybody's saying on the news, which is that he didn't finish off Saddam because we were actually allied with the Arab countries in our defeat of Saddam. So it was a very powerful coalition that Bush had created. We were actually fighting alongside the Syrians to defeat Saddam. So it's what they wanted too. They didn't want Saddam taking over the Middle East either. But it was just very impressive that he put together this coalition. But
the war was prompted by Saddam taking over the country of what, Kuwait?
Yeah. So, all right. So what happened was Saddam invaded Kuwait.
For no reason other than he thought he could, and Kuwait is a rich country.
Right. And it would have given him control over basically all the oil in the world, except for he would have had a controlling interest in all the world's oil. He would have had incredible power. And the other Arab countries were afraid that he was just going to keep going, that he was going to take over Saudi Arabia next, because he apparently couldn't defeat Iran. So instead of going east, he went south. So Bush was very good at getting this coalition together of countries that wanted to stop Saddam already. So, arguably they would have done it. They wouldn't have done it without America. They needed American leadership. But to me, the most important thing that he did was bring America back into fighting wars. Now, I know everybody thinks Republicans are warmongers, but if you lived through that time, we had not prosecuted a war since Vietnam.
We had little wars like Grenada.
Right, but I mean, we were basically afraid to fight. And it's hard for people to believe this if you're a millennial, but the United States had a bitter experience in fighting Vietnam. And what happened was we were basically afraid to fight again. We didn't have the gumption anymore.
Can I give an alternate?
Well, let me just point this out. So when Bush invaded Iraq, fought to defeat Saddam, it was the first time the American army had been used since Vietnam to any great extent.
Another way of putting it is having what you call a bitter experience in war inoculates you against war fighting for a decade or two, or at least it did in this case. It made people not willing to engage in that shit for a while.
Yeah, and I have to say, even I was at the time very afraid and very mistrustful. I actually spoke with, I think his name was Kovacs, the guy that was born on the 4th of July. Ron Kovac. I spoke personally with Ron Kovac. I saw him at a rally, and I came up to him afterwards in his wheelchair, and I said, "What are we going to do? You know, I mean, we're going to be in another war again. Man, America's going to go out there with imperialism," and Kovac was going, right on. Yeah, we got to stop the violence, you know, and so me and Kovac of all, you know, think of Kovac. Right. Yeah, imagine the me after everything I've said, going, yeah, we got to argue, talking in concert with this anti-war protester, saying, man, we got to bring down the American government so we can stop war and bring peace to the world. Well, I was into all that.
Not just any war protester. This is the guy that they made the Tom Cruise movie Born on the 4th of July. A guy who was paralyzed in the war, in the Vietnam War. He got, you know, shot in the spine or blown up
And his story was the story of a guy that went from gung-ho supporting of the Vietnam War to a major arguer against American imperialism. And so I didn't realize this would become a personal story. So there I was, believing in all that, and the war lasted 100 hours. We wiped them out in 100 hours, and by the time the war was over, I realized I was wrong. And unfortunately, I have to say, success justified the deed. I actually thought, well, Christ, if we can beat somebody in 100 hours, then maybe we should use force, and maybe force is a useful thing for the U.S., and I was wrong. And that was, but I remained a Democrat until 9/11. But I just want to say one more thing. When I was against the war, the Gulf War, I was listening to my hero at that time, Bill Clinton, who was saying, well, you know, we have to be very wary of violence against Saddam because he may have chemical weapons, you know? And so Clinton was scared. Clinton was on talk shows. He was not prepared. Bill Clinton didn't know what to do, and he was afraid of war with Saddam because of there was a big fear that Saddam would use chemical weapons against our troops. So they were all being fitted with gas masks, and I believed all that shit. And so I'd just like to say, here's one more example of Democrat cowardice facing as opposed to Republican bravery, and the Republicans were right. And because I was a Democrat then, I was wrong, and Bill Clinton
What about
was,
when Bill Clinton?
And Bill Clinton was wrong.
What about when Bill Clinton staged the airstrikes against Kosovo and helped solve that mess?
That was good.
Yeah, and then later he before 9/11, I don't know what went wrong, but Bill Clinton tried to blow up Osama bin Laden and then ended up striking an aspirin factory.
No, he had Saddam, he had Osama, and what happened was some Democrat lawyer said, "No, don't shoot him," and so Bill Clinton let him go.
Well, that was one thing. Yeah, somebody had him in his gun sights, but also Bill Clinton did try to blow him up.
No, when we attacked that aspirin factory, it was after he had attacked one of our ships or the Khobar Towers. Either way, there was Muslim extremist attacks during the Clinton administration, and Clinton was kind of pathetic. They had attacked, as I say, one of our ships, and they'd attacked a building called Khobar Towers, and Clinton was pathetic and didn't really accomplish anything.
All right, let's move on.
Another example of Democrat weakness.
Fine.
Real quick, do you think that, I mean, what is your view on the fact that it was when Bush 41 started this war that the Fatah against the United States began, and still to this day haunts us?
The fatwa?
Well, yeah, it's not Fatah. What is that?
Is it Fatah? I don't know. I thought it was Fatah. Anyway, Well, I mean, the history of the U.S. and its relationships in the Mideast has always, it's been ugly. Not just the U.S., but all Western powers in the Mideast. It's a mess, and generally the Western powers interfering in the Mideast has for a century and more just not made things necessarily better.
I'm really glad.
No, hold on one sec. The deal, like, there were 19, actually 20 hijackers on 9/11. One of them was late for his plane or something, didn't get on the plane. But 19 actually made it onto planes that got crashed into stuff. And how many of them were from Saudi? 14 of them? 17 of them?
I don't know.
Like, at least 80% of them were from Saudi Arabia. But we've been reluctant to act against Saudi Arabia because they've got a bunch of oil, and we have huge financial interests over there. And you see, it's one more chapter in that appeasing Saudi Arabia, where Trump is not willing to speak out against the Saudi prince who's in charge, who had Khashoggi cut up with a bone saw. But the deal, and then Saudi Arabia, which is one of the most monarchical of monarchies, that place is totally run by its royal family. And the royal family over there has 20,000 members, and they've all got a shitload of money. And one way they keep their people from rebelling against them is by keeping them pissed off at the West. And so, yeah, when you mention that, yeah, any kind of intervention of the Western powers in the Mideast gives countries like Saudi an excuse to say, don't get pissed at us, the guys running your country and keeping all the money. Be pissed at America, be pissed at, at France, at England. It's anyway, go ahead.
Well, you've bought the Democrat line.
Which line?
This is typical of Democrat cowardice. Let me remind you that the very first war the United States had was against the Barbary pirates. These were the pirates, the Islamic pirates from Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. The reason the Barbary pirates attacked our country was because we were the infidel.
Well, hold on. This is 1795.
I know, but what I'm saying is the reason that the Muslims have been attacking us all along, and when they've had any kind of ability to attack us, they have, is because we are Christian, we're associated with the Christian religion, and because we support Israel. Now, if you would like to change so that America becomes a Muslim country, then I guess they'll stop attacking us. And if you decide that we want to abandon Israel, then maybe they'll leave us alone. But until then, it's sheer Democrat cowardice to say that we can't intervene. Moreover, the United States intervened to save Muslims when Bill Clinton bombed Yugoslavia, and the United States intervened to save Muslims when it saved Kuwait from Saddam Hussein. So our intervention hasn't been against anybody in particular. We've been trying to do the right thing and to help the countries that needed help.
Well,
that's my first point.
No,
you made 2 points. You made 2 points. I have to make my second point because you said...
What were my 2 points? Because I think
your second point was to shit on Trump because he won't attack Saudi Arabia with some sort of diplomatic rift because they killed one reporter, and the Democrats didn't say one thing when the Iranians were killing thousands and thousands, of their own people. The Iranians actually killed hundreds of thousands of their own people during the Ayatollah, the first Ayatollah's administration and have continued to do so. The Iranians threw 7,000 homosexuals off the tops of buildings under the Obama administration.
Are we friends with Iran?
No, but the point is this: it is the Democrats that wanted to make a deal with Iran. So, in other words, if the Democrats make a deal with Iran, even though they kill hundreds of thousands of their own people, including journalists, that's okay by you. But if the Saudis kill one reporter, you want to shit on Trump for trying to maintain an alliance with Saudi Arabia against Iran. And it's just typical of Democrat hypocrisy.
Yeah, that's not exactly what my... I mean...
You think that Trump should make some sort of stand against our ally Saudi Arabia. But you didn't say, but you wanted us to have a deal with Iran.
Yeah, but Iran is not our friend. We don't like the regime. Now, I admit that Obama probably didn't do enough at times when there was unrest in Iran.
He didn't do anything. He let them slaughter their own people. He didn't say a word about it.
I just said, but like, I'm just saying
Thanks for reminding me, by the way.
Fine. I just said that, like, our history of the West and the Mideast, it's a long and not always successful history.
Well, we freed the Arabs from the Ottoman Empire after World War I.
Okay, but then...
They wouldn't even have these countries if we hadn't defeated Turkey.
Fine, but like when the Western empires left that area, withdrew and gave governance to the countries over there, we kind of set up arbitrary borders among those countries that have been problematic. And I mean, but it's always been, I mean, to go back to Corolla for a second, he has a set of jokes about how, where the headlines of any era is, trouble in the Mideast. That place has too many competing interests in too small a space that there's always been trouble. And will be trouble, into the conceivable future.
That was the jihad against the
I don't know. Let's move on to something else. Where?
I mean, I can tell you this, just to be totally full disclosure. The reason that Osama bin Laden said that he attacked the World Trade Center was because of American intervention, because we established a base in Saudi Arabia or Kuwait after the Gulf War, where we had to drive Saddam out of Kuwait. But I'm sorry, but the Kuwaitis and the Saudis wanted us to have a base there in order to defend them from Saddam in Iraq. So I can't take my orders from Osama bin Laden. If Osama bin Laden doesn't like that, then you can't say, well, gee, we brought it on ourselves. We intervened in their politics.
No,
you're taking his side.
No, I'm not taking his side. I'm just
saying. Well, you're saying it every time we intervene, we bring it on ourselves.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that some countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, like to play us, not play us, but they like to play their own people by keeping them pissed off at us instead of being more pissed off at them, because so they can hold on to power and hold on to wealth. I'm not saying that we're the dickheads all the time. I'm saying that Saudi is often.
Well, you were just saying that Trump was being an asshole because he wouldn't cut off Saudi Arabia.
I wasn't really saying that. What I was saying is that that's one more chapter in our relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is, full of contradictions and ugliness.
Okay. Well, right now the Israelis and the Saudis have an alliance against Iran. And for that reason, Trump is not going to be bullied by the Democrats into breaking the alliance with Saudi. And,
fine.
and furthermore, the Saudis are buying they're buying $500 billion worth of armaments from us. Now, you may say money doesn't matter, but $500 billion is getting up there.
Okay.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And Trump says that if they don't buy that equipment from us, they're going to buy it from Russia or China. So I don't know why we should give Russia or China $500 billion.
All right, fine. Let's move on to, you said that,
I was just going to say that Trump is on the ropes right now with the Michael Cohen.
I'll get to that after this.
Okay.
All right, so you said, I'm lazy and I don't look at comments as much as I should, and you said that people were giving me shit in the comments or disappointed with me because I said that women should be allowed to do physics even though, there might not be as many high IQ women as high IQ men.
That's not exactly what the point was. Let's refresh the audience. It'll take a minute, okay?
All right, okay.
Okay. My problem was this. I had just heard a lecture that the Democrats have begun to strangle even the sciences by forcing a quota system into the hiring rates of the labs. And one of the things they found was that less qualified women were being hired in the faculties of physics and the physics. I don't think they have labs. They have, what do physics have? They've got departments or whatever.
Yeah.
And the way that they evaluate who to hire is they look at their contributions to the field of physics. And you can evaluate whether a contribution led to progress in physics because every physicist writes papers. Mm-hmm. And if you write a paper that is cited 100 times, mm-hmm. it means that it's far more influential and has...
a paper that's cited 3 times.
Right. So what has happened is the physics departments are now hiring women on a quota system that have 1/10 of the qualifications of men that have written papers. So they're demonstrably less qualified.
Which physics departments?
All of them. This is around the West, around the United States and Britain, Canada. What they're doing is they're looking for women to be in these physics departments. And it just so happens that it can be demonstrated by a study, which I can find on the internet if you want, that they are hiring women with vastly fewer citations, vastly less important work in the field of physics that can be proven demonstrably. It's not a matter of opinion.
All right. And
they're doing this because of Democrat political correctness. So the sciences are actually being weakened because of this, because we're getting less genius in the field of science.
Who's arguing that the sciences are being weakened?
Well, the physicists that are getting rejected for these jobs are saying, look, I've gotten more awards, I've written things that are being used in the field vastly more than other people that are female that are being hired now, and that the result of this is that overall in the politically correct West, not China, not Russia, the sciences will begin to decline because it requires genius to do that field.
Well, really? Okay, so how many people worked on CERN? CERN is this gigantic particle accelerator under Switzerland and Italy that discovered the Higgs boson. How many scientists do you think worked on that thing?
Don't know.
10,000.
Okay.
So do you think every one of the 10,000 was a genius?
I would say that I hope that they were hired because of their accomplishments and not because of what was between their legs.
They were hired to...
And you disappointed the readers because they said it was very peculiar of you to come down on the side of hiring people because of the shape of their genitalia.
Well, you didn't make this argument in this way when we talked about it last week.
All right, fine.
But
well,
the
what do you
deal
think
is,
about it now, then?
All right, the deal is, for one thing, and I mentioned this last week, one reason physics may not have been so productive over the past couple decades is that physics got very fascinated, or at least the most theoretical arm of physics got really super obsessed with string theory, which now looks like it may not be really good at generating results.
Right, and the reader that was pissed off said that, what difference does that make? That doesn't mean that we should start hiring less qualified people because they're women.
Well, I would argue that it's a little like sports, except worse, where everybody, probably a fair chunk of people get into physics because they hope that they're geniuses, and they hope to be the next Einstein or Newton. And then, the same way that every kid who goes out for football or basketball hopes to be the next LeBron, and then people find out they're not. And they maybe stick with basketball to the best, to the best of their abilities and go as far as they can, and maybe even stick with basketball after they're done playing and become, coaches or trainers or whatever. And it's the same deal with physics. That people get into physics with high hopes and expectations, and they find out what their actual level of ability and determination is, and most people do not go on to fight to function at the highest theoretical Einsteinian level. Most people find jobs in physics that fall short of being a huge genius. Most people aren't. But physics doesn't run primarily on genius. Physics runs on people doing physics that aren't all geniuses. And some of the greatest people in physics, Richard Feynman being the primary example, he prided himself on not being a genius. He probably was a genius, but he liked to brag that he wasn't. He said that his IQ was only like 110 or 119, and that it was only because he had an inquisitive, questioning attitude that he could, and that had a toolkit of ways of doing inquiry, that he was able to do great physics without being overly smart, even though he probably was overly smart. But physics doesn't run on genius. Physics runs on people of smart people, but not all geniuses. But physics runs on people doing the tasks of physics, coming up with theories, testing the theories, and you don't have to be a Newton or an Einstein to do that. And women in physics happen to have a good record that often gets overlooked because of gender biasy stuff.
Oh, come on.
For instance, Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin, I'm mispronouncing her last name, discovered what stars are made out of. Nobody knows her.
What year was this?
Right around 1920.
Exactly. Nobody today is going to discount someone's achievements because they're female. That was that was almost 100 years ago.
But it's not like completely unqualified women are being given jobs in physics.
All right, so...
And
go ahead.
There has been gender bias. I mean, who discovered the expansion of the universe?
Wasn't that guy...
Edwin Hubble.
Oh, okay.
Who did all the work, all the observational work, and cataloging work. Well, I'll just tell you. It was all women who did the legwork that allowed him to make that discovery. And it came out of the same group of women that Cecilia Payne came out of. These women who were hired to be human computers and catalogers at Harvard. This was thought to be women's work because it wasn't theoretically demanding, yet these women laid the observational and cataloging groundwork that led to the one guy you know.
Well, look, Rick, nobody is saying that women can't do physics or shouldn't be permitted to, but I don't believe you should be choosing who is hired based on their genitalia. If there are qualified women, then they should be hired, but there shouldn't be a quota system. Do you realize?
So next time we break, let's look up quota system in physics hiring.
All right, you want to do it right now?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
Are we painting these again? All right, 81.4. All right, so I read a couple articles about the hiring of women in physics, and it looks more like when equally qualified candidates are up for hiring. There's recently been a preference to hire women. Not that they're less qualified, but they're equally qualified. And this is, I think, seen as a reaction to, well, centuries, and more recently, just generations of women being discouraged from professional attainment in the hard sciences. It's not that underqualified women are being hired, it's that equally qualified women are being hired.
Well, if I knew you were going to say that, then I would have found an article saying the reverse. Yeah, because the big complaint is that women that are less qualified are being hired. And I'll find an article on that, but I'll just leave it at, do we want to just leave it at this? Because, I mean,
yeah.
You found something that said the reverse of an article I found.
All right. Well, yes. Table it till next week. So I want to talk about...
Wait. I wanted to answer an audience question. Somebody asked me about my paint. So I'm going to make this brief. Whoever it was that asked me about my paint, they wanted me to... I don't really understand your question.
Do you want to see the paint?
No, I can show it to the camera. Here's the brand that I use.
I'll zoom in.
Okay. You got it?
Let's focus in 1 second.
It's called Archival Brand. It's from Australia, and it never cracks. Did you get the picture of it?
Yep.
Okay.
It's stretchy is what you mean.
Yeah,
it's got what? Crack. It's got like polymers in like
it has something in it that
latex,
that stays flexible, so it doesn't freeze up. I use yellow alizarin, that's permanent alizarin, cad red. For the pants, I've been using ultramarine, diazazine purple, and magenta. I use lamp black, lead white, and titanium white. Titanium white for the background, lead white for the foreground.
If you want to know more about this kind of stuff, there's a show on Netflix now called Something, Something and Forgery. And each week they take a look at a painting or two and try to determine whether it's real or bullshit.
Yeah. Or you could buy my set of DVDs, which will instruct you on how I paint. If you just send me an email to I'm on Facebook, just send me a message on Facebook. I can sell you my DVDs on how I paint. It's $140 for an 11-hour set. Plus $10 or so for shipping. Next question.
Where do they find you on Facebook?
Oh, just Lance Richland. I'm the only one.
All right, so one of my wife's favorite shows is Shark Tank, which is the show where people bring on their new products and inventions and try to get billionaires to give them money to help move their products along. And I don't know, last week I was watching you and I each eat protein powder, which is, it's a huge pain in the mess to mix up.
Okay.
These guys had the idea to enclose the protein powder in like a Tide Pod, a little plastic or see-through kind of covering that dissolves in water or any liquid. And you take your protein pack, which is a pain to stir up, and you just put it in your shaker cup, screw on the lid and just shake it, and the covering dissolves, and then the protein just gets mixed, and there's no making a mess with it.
Okay.
And these guys made a multi-million-dollar deal.
Jesus.
I was thinking, we're smart guys. We should try to brainstorm and come up with stuff. I came up with a really good bad idea based on the spit bucket. In Hollywood, there's a thing called the spit bucket, where if an actor, or more likely an actress, is doing a scene where he or she is eating and doesn't want to eat like 3,000 calories if they have to do 20 takes, they take a bite of hamburger and say their line and then cut, and then the actor spits the hamburger into a bucket so they don't get the calories from it. Because everybody in Hollywood tries to minimize their calories. I was thinking 2/3 of this is a really bad idea because it's just too gross and ridiculous to implement, but 2/3 of American adults are overweight. And the problem isn't putting the food in your mouth where it's delicious. The problem is swallowing the food, which means that the calories will be absorbed. And as a semi-psycho, semi-anorexic person, I have occasionally taken a bite of cookie and been like, yeah, why do I need this cookie in my mouth? And I'll spit it out. And so if we could make it, we had a product, which I call the spit tower, that would make it easier and not so gross for people to spit out their food. You could go to a restaurant and eat rich foods, fettuccine Alfredo and eggs Benedict. And if you had a spit tower next to you, a discreet place where you could tuck your head, spit out at least some of your mouthfuls of food, you'd get the delicious taste, and then when you're done with the taste, you just spit it out and not absorb the calories. So that's my dumb idea, the spit tower.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was actually something called a
vomitorium.
Vomitorium, yeah, and the Romans used to have these incredible feasts, and what happened was they found that they could eat more if they vomited every once in a while part of the meal. So the Romans typically, in the Roman excessive feasts, would vomit quite regularly. It was part of the custom so that they could get more food into themselves. So I think you're onto something there, Rick.
I think I agree with most of that. I think the term vomitorium is a mistranslation. I think it means something else. But yeah, I think they did do a lot of puking. But puking is bad because it erodes your teeth, because you're bringing up the acidic contents of your stomach. You want to get the food out of yourself before it has to be vomited up.
So did we talk about Stan Lee? Did
No.
I tell you did I give you my review of the Black Panther on this show?
Yes.
I gave it on the show, or did I give it to you in private?
Both. But yeah, on the show too.
All right. Well, then let's not talk about that.
Now, what was the next thing? Do you have any ideas? The first part of coming up often with a new invention is finding a problem that nobody else has noticed as a problem.
Well, my idea is I have these oil paintings of human beings, and they're really nice, and nobody wants to buy one. So that's my idea. Let's sell oil paintings. By the way, you know what? I didn't make it clear. On our last show, I showed one of my portraits a couple weeks ago, and I said it was really expensive, like $3,000 or $4,000. But I will do a head and neck for $1,800. So they're not unreasonably priced product. Okay.
Can somebody send in their photo and you can paint it?
Nah, I don't. I'd rather I'd rather talk with the person a little bit and get to know how we can make it an exceptional project. Because just copying someone's photo that someone mails in is not the best strategy artistically.
Maybe you could work out a deal where they come and they pose and they'll be part of the show.
Yeah.
All right.
Say that?
You know what? That's a good idea. What we can do is we're coming to the end of what I can do with this painting. And I know people are talking about Patreoning us, which would be great because my payment is this painting. But if somebody wants to be on the show painted to replace Rick, we could do that. I'm thinking maybe just a head and neck, but that is a thought. And for that, it would only be $1,800. So that's an interesting idea. Good. We came up with an idea, the three of us. Very good. Good job, director.
Thank you.
All right, well, next topic.
Next topic.
Oh, like last week we had an argument about the number of undocumented aliens, or if you want to call them illegal immigrants, you know, whatever, you know, it's, this past week, it came out from Pew Research that for the first time in like 15 years, 20 years, the number of undocumented immigrants in America has dropped under 11 million to 10.7 million. And you have a study that says the number is more like 16 to 30 million, with, you know, an average, you know, 23 million plus or minus 7 million. And I was saying, yeah, that's just one study. And yeah, you're saying it's out of, I don't know, MIT and Yale. And I'm saying, yeah, but it's still just one study. And I looked up to see how long Pew, the Pew Latino or Hispanic Research Center has been looking at this since 1995, for the past 23 years. So I'm just going to say that I trust the people who've been studying this for 23 years more than I trust the authors of a single paper.
Well, I also have the there's another study by, it's in the, now I have to look that up. I have to look up the name of the study. But there's another equally well-researched study by another group. So now I have two studies on my side. I would have to look it up. The name escapes me. But there's an equally respected one that says 20 to 30 million. So now we're just talking about I believe my studies, you believe your study. There's no, unless we both read both of these studies, it's just a bias.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the next topic?
There was an earthquake in Alaska, and what does that pose risk to California?
All right. Well, we're lucky in that our big one can't.
Bear Stearns. There's a Bear Stearns study.
Oh, the one cited by frickin' Ann Coulter in her book?
Yes.
All right, well, all right. But yeah, but what you said, we each have our studies. So anyway, Alaska got hit with a 7, and which is, I think the Richter scale is exponential, but it might even be worse than that, where I want to say that a 7.0 has 10 times the energy of a 6.0, but I think it's even worse than that. But we're lucky in that our big one is when the San Andreas ruptures. You get an earthquake when two big plates of rock either like slide past each other or one slides under another one. And the potential maximum strength of an earthquake is proportionate to the length of the fault. And the longer the fault, the more energy that can be released when it lets go and slips.
Stop moving.
Sorry, I'm doing faults. And we're lucky in that the San Andreas is relatively short, so the maximum big one that we can get in the area is roughly an 8, which would be terrible. It's huge. But Alaska has had 9+ earthquakes. In like 1960 or 61 or 62, they got hit with a 9.0 or a 9.1, where the shaking went on, the full-on earthquake, went on for 5.
Yeah, you don't have to do a little dance to show.
All right, but the shaking went on for 10 minutes, maybe longer.
That was good.
And they had a
shaking.
Yeah, well, and they had a.
You know, a normal man wouldn't have explained an earthquake that way, Rick.
What
Just want to tell you.
Yeah.
Did I catch that out of the corner of my eye? Were you doing a little shaky dance?
Just after you made fun of me, I was doing this. I wasn't doing this until you made fun of me for doing a shaky dance.
Fair enough.
All right. But anyway, we're supposed to, there's a high probability that California will get hit, that Southern California will get hit with a big one in the next 30 years. We're way overdue. And the big one for us is going to be an 8.0 or in that vicinity. And it'll knock the hell out of Southern California, but you know, it shouldn't, I mean, it'll kill some people, but if we're lucky, it won't kill more than a couple hundred people because we have good zoning laws. The building code book has gone from being this thick, 20 years ago to being this thick now with seismic rules.
That's what she said.
Yeah. And so we'll take a huge hit, but it won't be as devastating as what could hit other areas of the world, like Alaska that got hit with this 9.0 that and a tsunami that was, I think, over 60 feet tall. It ran some. You look it up. Look up the Greater Alaska earthquake, and I mean it's just lucky that Alaska in 1960 was fairly underpopulated, or they would have suffered thousands of casualties. All right, next topic.
The NFL.
Oh, well, okay, so LA has two teams that are probably going, one team, the Rams, just clinched the playoffs. And the other ones, we have another team, the LA Chargers, that is almost certainly going to the playoffs. And it's just weird it's a weird time to like football in that we increasingly know that when we watch football, we're watching people accumulate physical damage that will mess them up in later life. Damage to their joints, damage to their brains in particular. And it makes it slightly less fun to watch the game. Lance?
Well, it's a good question. I think that there should be training in jiu-jitsu and boxing. I know that in Olympic boxing, or was it in certain amateur boxings, they wear headgear. I don't know that headgear actually helps because I think it means you can get hit harder. So my problem is this. I very much am in favor of learning how to defend yourself with boxing and jiu-jitsu and MMA type activities, but the problem is that I don't believe I debate about whether it's a good idea to have these things because football I don't really watch that much, but MMA, I mean, they know that Muhammad Ali was, really fuzzy towards the end. A lot of these boxers end up punch drunk. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. I don't know if it's. I will watch it, but I just don't know if it's right. So what do you think?
It's a tough thing in that, they did a survey of Olympic athletes I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and they said, would you trade getting a gold medal for 10 years or 15 years off your life? And I think, some huge percentage of the athletes said, oh yeah, I'd take if I could win a gold medal, I'd give up the last 10 years of my life. So that's thing one. Thing two is that it seems as if, I think, this brings up another subject we can talk about in a sec, that I looked up how many jobs are lost to undocumented immigrants. About 8 million, according to studies, out of 156 or so million total jobs in America. Then I looked up how many jobs will be lost to automation and AI, and that's going to be 50 million by the year 2030. So if we're going to build a wall, we need to build a wall against robots.
Well, I actually have a response to that one.
Okay.
What I heard was there's been a recent book that was written. I don't know the author, but it was on the effect of AI on the workforce, and he came up with a novel theory that is not usually taken into account, and that is that when a company has more automation at, say, a restaurant, they hire fewer employees for that restaurant.
Yeah.
But with the extra money, they open more restaurants in more areas. And those new restaurants that they open hire more employees. So it turns out that the automation doesn't necessarily put people out of work. It just makes everybody's lives a little better.
Yeah, but we're like, it probably, that happens to some extent, but also people lose jobs. But as it applies to sports, well, not exactly, but along with AI is going to be are going to be great strides in biotech, and it's going to make sports weird, where we're going to have to figure out, somebody just got nailed in China for doing genetic engineering of the unborn or something. But then, people are saying, no, that shouldn't be allowed, but that's going to be allowed. People are going to offer gene tweaking, so you get babies that are going to have less genetic disease, and you're going to get designer babies.
Okay.
And there are going to be very effective drugs to increase performance, and there may be post-birth gene tweaks. It used to be that human growth hormone was very expensive and dangerous because it was harvested from the brains of the dead. But now it's a genetically engineered product. It's a product that's not made from dead people. It's grown in labs, and you can be, and it's less. It's still pretty expensive, but it's not as crazy expensive as when it was harvested. And you can be sure that there are some psycho parents out there who are getting HGH, growth hormone, for their kids to make their kids. It's approved for use in kids who have dwarfism, kids who are going to end up being under like 4'10", to see if you can get them up over 5 feet so they can have a more normal life. Okay. But you can be sure that there's a black market. In fact, there is a black market for HGH among bodybuilders, and probably another component of the black market is psycho parents who want to take a kid who's going to be 6'2" and see if they can get him up to 6'5", so they might have a better chance at a college or pro career in sports. And there's going to be more and more of that, to the point where there are going to have to be increasingly weird rules and restrictions on athletes. Just there's going to be more areas where to look at restrictions on what, as we get more and more able to do things to the human body and to human performance.
Well, I just want to say we've always had abortion. So there's always been designer babies. If somebody didn't think that someone was intelligent enough to give birth, we've actually encountered that ethical problem already. Mm-hmm. And certain societies, the Nazis, you know, a lot of people forget that Planned Parenthood was begun by somebody,
a eugenicist?
A woman that wanted to reduce the population of black people. I don't remember her name, but that was the origin of Planned Parenthood, and she's celebrated as a great feminist icon. But her real goal was to get black people to have abortions. So when you go to Planned Parenthood, remember that is what Planned Parenthood was started for. She would go into the black communities and try to encourage these women to abort their babies so that there would be fewer blacks in America.
Sanger or something.
Oh yeah, that's right, Louis Sanger.
Yeah. All right. So there's.
So we have 1 minute. Do you want to tell your worst, horrible Hanukkah story?
I don't have a horrible Hanukkah story.
A happy Hanukkah story?
It's the first night of Hanukkah. I don't know. I mean, it's happy that we get 8 nights of gifts.
We actually talked about this a year ago, and I remember saying Hanukkah is important because if it wasn't for Hanukkah, monotheism, the belief in one God, would not have survived. The Greeks had conquered Judea, Samaria, and they were going to destroy the Jewish religion, which would have destroyed monotheism in the world. So Hanukkah is very important. It was when the Jews rose up against the Greeks.
Yet, the modern, well, it's like Christmas too, where it might be historically an important event, but it's been hijacked as a means to just get presents. The same way Christmas is, you know, it's Hanukkah was never like one of the big two holidays are Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and Hanukkah was always like a JV holiday that's become more and more important as it